Okay, another video about the whole Epstein thing, mostly because, and I know that people are going to think I'm trying to defend the administration. I don't care about the administration. What I care about is an objective an objective perspective, or at least as close as we ridiculous human beings can get to an objective perspective on the things that happened, the truth about what happened, what was said and what was not, and those kinds of things. Now, as somebody who has been half-assed following this entire thing from the beginning, been curious. I've watched the documentaries on Epstein and Ghislaine. I've watched the news. I've watched these things. Like, obviously, nobody can religiously watch. Well, some people, I guess some of you can. But nobody can religiously watch every clip that it contains everything that every person said. But I'm just going to tell you that from my cursory following of the various different things that have been said, the promises that have been made, my understanding was that the Jeffrey Epstein files would be released, and that those would be released at a point when they decided that it was appropriate to do so. And while this interview that is being brought up where she affirmed that there would be a client list is being pointed to as a promise that was made and that has now been broken and there's a cover-up and all this stuff, if that's all you really, like, if you just watch the conversation and you don't have any kind of mental context in your brain when you're watching that conversation, then you hear something that isn't necessarily being said, and it requires a little bit of, the nuance word that nobody likes to use when you're watching this, okay? So here's my thing. The way that the reporter asked the question did say, do you guys have a client list? Absolutely, that's what the reporter asked her. And her response was something to the effect of, yes, we're looking at all of that information right now, as well as we're looking at the Kennedy files and all that stuff. We're going to try to make those public. So if you listen to her response, what it sounds like to me, and yes, I'm defending her because I legitimately think that this is what happened, because this is the kind of stuff that happens to people when they're in stressful situations like interviews. I believe that she didn't really pay attention to the fact that he said client list. And she made it very clear she didn't even know what was in the files at the time of the interview that these people are pointing to for her claiming that they had a client list. When they did their little publicity stunt about giving the files to all of those social media people, I don't recall them saying anything about specific information that was included in those files. They just made a big show about the fact that, hey, we're releasing the files. The files. Files as an idea does not necessarily mean specific pieces of content that the public is looking for. It means that we're releasing the files that we have available to us. And as I made clear in a previous video, we all like to see conspiracies, even if there isn't one to be seen. And maybe this is a case where there's no conspiracy, and we've all allowed our imaginations to be drummed up to the point where we're on a witch hunt at this point. Now, as I said, I haven't seen everything that's out there. All I can bring you is my perspective as a maybe more informed than the average American as to what politics are happening and how they're happening and who's saying what and what policies are this and that. Like, I'm certainly not an expert. And yeah, maybe they did at some point say those things, but I don't recall ever hearing those promises being made. I don't really recall those specific things like videos directly implicating anybody or files that directly implicate anybody. I don't remember those promises ever being made. I remember hearing things about videos, and it seems a pretty reasonable statement to me that if a man is participating in sexually abusing underage children, that he probably has a vast library of child prawn videos. I'm trying to not use the right, probably screwed that up. It would make sense to me that he has those kinds of things. It also makes sense to me that he would not keep any kind of incriminating documents in a place that would be obvious for law enforcement to find. Yeah, he had cameras in his estate. Yeah, he had recording devices and everything. He had like secret rooms and stuff where he kept recording devices and stuff like that. But I mean, even in the 90s, we did have, the ability to record those things onto a disk and then erase everything and move it to a secure location on the off chance that, this very rich person gets raided. I mean, my argument in any of this is not to downplay Epstein, his crimes, and it's not to say that the people who were victimized should not get justice and that we shouldn't go after them aggressively. Absolutely. But when you start fixating on these kinds of things, you're drawing attention away from the important part, and especially when the arguments that are being made come across as disingenuous, because in my mind, this interview that's being pointed to right now as the source of her saying that they have a client list, it seems to me like she was already focused on answering the question rather than listening to the specific words that he said. She was focusing on files. He said client list. She didn't pick up the distinction and was just continuing to talk about files. And if you want to say that she didn't give over the files, well, they gave over the files. I mean, I obviously can't guarantee that they gave over everything that they had. Obviously, it's all secretive documentation and all that stuff. So, who knows? But they gave over something, and they gave over what they supposedly gave what they promised to give. So, it sucks. I want to make these points, but I know that there's going to be a large portion of anybody who happens to come across this video who thinks that I'm just shilling for the Trump administration. I really don't care. I don't care about the Trump administration. I care about when we say things that we put things in the proper context. And if you are the kind of person who doesn't understand that, maybe there was a misunderstanding during that exchange with the reporter or whatever, like if there's a long list of repetitive statements that they have client lists and videos of incriminating evidence and these kinds of things. If they specifically said those things multiple times, not just one person asked a question and the other person didn't quite catch on to exactly what it was they were asking and they just answered the question the way they heard it. You see what I'm saying? Like, we have a really bad tendency to just blow things up out of proportion for no reason. Outrage sells, and all the content creators in the world are going to be on here trying to sell outrage. I get it. Try not to let that be the thing that guides your thought processes. Try to look at the situation. Try to actually do a little bit of your own investigation. Does it suck that we're not getting the information that everybody wanted? Yeah. But if the information was never there in the first place, they can't give it to you. And if they made promises based off of their internal understanding that they were just talking about a set of files that they were going to give you, and they gave you the files, then they did what they said they were going to do. It may not be satisfying. What we got may not be satisfying, but it doesn't constitute lying unless they really went out of their way to repeatedly make it like, oh, we're going to give you this really juicy information. Me personally, over the last year, I haven't heard anything that indicated to me that the files that we were going to be getting would contain anything specific as far as, it's gonna name this person and this person and this person, or we've got videos of this person with this person. Like, I don't recall ever hearing that. Maybe if you're obsessively watching this stuff, you might have seen some things that might have inferred it. But if you only inferred it, then that's you putting your own spin on things, not necessarily them saying that they had it. You see what I'm saying? So please don't take this as me defending the Trump administration, because they do a lot of crap that I don't like. But at the same time, it does nobody any good, and it's pretty hypocritical to accuse people of doing things if they didn't do it. Especially when we make mistakes all the time. It's one thing for government to be corrupt. It's another thing for people to make an honest mistake. And at least as far as the clip that they were showing here to try to show that she said they had a client list, it sounds way more like an honest mistake, not paying attention to what he specifically said, than trying to imply that they had more than they did. Okay? So that's my thought process. I could be wrong. There may be tons of evidence out there, but I don't recall ever hearing any of it, and this video clip seems to be taken out of context as far as I can tell. So that's my 2 cents. Take that for what it's worth. And yeah, have a nice day. Hit the like button, subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers, and I will see you for the next one.